This is a recording of the June 4th NMRA-PCR Coast Division Saturday virtual event featuring discussion about our May 22nd auction, future event planning, and what we are modeling. So real quickly today, we have four things I thought were worth just spending a little time talking about. A little bit about the auction. Wanted to have a discussion about what kind of clinics or formal things everyone would like to have on these virtual events versus, when we have clinics at a meetup like in the South Bay in September. Do you want to have things on this? Should it be regular? What kind of things would you like to have? Just like to have a little discussion about that. A little bit of planning for the South Bay event. One of the things I want to do is kind of recruit some folks and then discuss, show what you're modeling. So with that kind of in mind as a agenda, talk a little bit about the auction. So we did an auction on 5/22. As we were talking about before, we did get a little visit by COVID, but don't seem to have had, as far as we can tell at this point, any transmissions or anything like that at the event. We'll keep our fingers crossed on that. We had a clinic beforehand. David Gibbons did a DCC install clinic of how to put decoders into Athearn Blue Box diesels. And that was, I think, went really well. You can see we've had about 10, 12 people attend that, which is pretty good for our auction's first event back. The auction itself was okay. We had about 60 people come. We did not cover the cost of the auction and the cost of the elks and what was made off the auction. The auction revenues were about 30-40% lower than they've been in the past. So that's something we actually have to talk about. One of the things I'm going to send out probably over the next week in the next extra is a request for folks that are interested in participating in an auction direction committee, is I guess the right way to say it. One of the things I think we definitely need to do is look at new locations for the auction. Those are locations outside of the Elks. The Elks cost us $775 to meet at. We really need to find places that we can get down closer to 400 if we want to be break even, unless the volume of the auction changes. So one of the questions is, can we get folks from different areas to take responsibility to go do the investigation in their local area of potential locations we could use? So for example, I live in Pleasanton. Would I be willing to take on looking in Pleasanton, Danville, and Livermore, go out and investigate, and then get together as a group and talk about, kind of brainstorm and go out and figure out what kind of facilities we can find: libraries, senior centers, veterans halls, whatever it might be, union halls. Can we find locations where we can go to that are more reasonable for our auction event? So that's kind of the outcome of the auction. Any comments about the auction overall for folks that were there? The one thing is, we did make the transition. As folks are probably aware, most of the auction committee has been involved with the auction for over 20 years. And there's been some pretty strong desire to change, especially in what they call the back office team, Bob Fernandez, et cetera. We actually had a new team come in. Jerry Ingram has taken over the back office. We had a few hiccups, quite frankly, some of them from yours truly. But I think we got through it for the first time, and we'll be better next time. We also were able to validate the software and that we can continue to use it and that it'll be effective. So all in all, it was a successful auction from having an auction for future auctions. And I think the learning around expenses and costs are important.
Bill, may I?
Certainly, feel free. I'm looking for feedback, comments from anyone about it.
How about, instead of them handing the tag to me when I'm up there as auctioneer, they hand the tag to you being on my left. You do whatever you need to do, then hand the tag to me, then I hand it on to the next person. It seemed like that was a rough patch all around, is that you had to have those tags.
Yeah, I think the challenge, there's some challenges there. That's one of the other things we need to talk about as a group is, do we need to adjust the flow or anything? And again, I think we need to kind of have an auction committee group get together, and we'll do a separate meeting on that for folks that are interested. But all in all, I thought it went pretty well, and for the folks that were involved that were new, I think everybody was pretty happy. So,
I have
um,
fun being an auctioneer. That was fun. Just calling stuff out and seeing people bid and everything was enjoyable. Now I know not to overprice stuff for a starting bid. I had some items that a dear friend I'd inherited from, and I thought they were worth much more than they really were. I think at least for the start.
yeah.
I
uh,
was I
go
was
ahead.
gonna add, okay. I was gonna add that the really I think we ought to start start with a minimum $5 bid. Um, yeah, minimum price. This $1 stuff is takes time and never usually never sells.
So yeah, so for everyone, we need to have, again, because of the financial situation, we're going to need to have some discussions about financials. For example, if you look and I need to go back through the data in more detail, and I have not done that. So this is a bit of a guesswork, but my gut assumption is that about half the items that sold for $1. So if you look at that and assume that of 300 items, 200 and something sold, that's 100 items for $1. If, and this is a big if, don't get me wrong, if all of those items that sold and the minimum were $2, that's another $100 in revenue. And granted, they might not have. So go ahead, Jesse. But so that's a thought process of raising the minimum. I mean, there's some questions we need to ask. Do we raise the minimum? Do we increase the percentage to the coast from 10% to 15% to increase revenue? And then
One
there,
of the
go ahead, Jesse.
oh,
Yep.
I was just gonna throw out the idea that there are a lot of stuff that, I mean, I want to get rid of this stuff kind of thing. And maybe what you want to do is bulk it up and okay, we got three $1 engines or something like that. Let's stick a rubber band around them and make a minimum bid $5 for the three of them as a starting bid. That would also move the auction a little faster.
Right. And I think the question there is $5 too big a jump from one something to get? There's a third area we will talk about, which is personally for me something I think we all need to think about, which is um, right now the sellers have no skin in the game as to the success of their item selling. In other words, I bring an item and I put it on the table. If I put 50 items out and 5 sell, I got my money for 5 and I get my other 45 items back, and there's no skin from my perspective. From our perspective, we have to spend the time running all 45 of those. So every time I was sitting there watching a no bid, for me, that's a waste. So one of the questions that we really need to ask is, do we want to have the sellers to have skin in the game? And by the way, I'm a big believer in this. I wrote a book, and one of the chapters is called Skin in the Game. I think everybody needs to have skin in the game. And that would basically say that there is some sort of, and I don't know what the number is, some sort of listing fee, like 15, 10 cents, 15 cents, 25 cents, that basically gets charged regardless of whether the item sells or not. So in other words, if you list 10 items and it's a 25% listing fee, when you go to check out and do the reconciliation, in addition to the chart, so if let's say you sold 5 of the items for $50, you would then get $45, but that would be less the $250 for the 10 item listing fee. So as the seller, instead of getting 45, you get $42.50, because the listing fee would be charged on all the items you listed. So, and again, the idea is, and by the way, the thought process here is really good. You guys are actually thinking, and what we need to do is we need to make it for the sellers so they have skin in the game and they think about whether or not this item is going to sell for the listing price, exactly what David said, the minimum price, and want to assure that it does sell at that price. One of the thought processes is we may need to do, maybe on a Saturday like this, a clinic on packaging and pricing your auction items to sell well. right? I mean, there's a skill to it. And by the way, I was a kid. I tell this story because it's really, I think it's important. When I was a kid, my dad used to take me to the auction every weekend. We lived in Reading. There was an auction out in the country auction, where basically a couple of buildings, everybody sold their crap. By the way, my favorite story was every time they got a toilet seat with, the toilet seat with the lift up cover, the auctioneer would pick it up and he'd hold it up and he'd say, "Oh, we got a cutting board and a picture frame here." So, to my mind, I always have good memories of that. But what my dad always did was he would buy 4 or 5 boxes for a couple of bucks each, bring them home. At home, he would take out what he wanted. The reason he bought the box, and he had some box at home, and he put some other things in, and he'd mix them up, and maybe make a more of a plumbing box. So he'd actually try to rearrange the stuff so he'd get more for it when he took it back to sell it the next week. And I think there's some skill to that we need to kind of to the auctioneers. It's not just throw your crap in a box and throw it on the table and hope it sells. We need to have more active marketing from our sellers than that, I think. And to be effective, just my thought process. So again, by the way, if you're interested in this, we're going to have an auction committee. We'll have meetings. We'll go through the discussion on the process. If it turns out that we think we need to, we'll do a survey of the membership and see what the membership wants. But the whole idea is to really go through and rethink some of this as we move forward, because quite frankly, we can't sustain having auctions like we did at the Elks going forward, where we lose $300 or $400. Our treasury will not support that.
One thing you need to look at is how many $1 items went no bid.
Yep, I agree, Sam.
I mean, you can say minimum $1 is too low, but they don't even sell at $1. What makes you think they're going to sell higher?
Well, and that's the point, is that maybe those items shouldn't be in the auction, or somebody should have taken 4 of those and put them together for $1. I mean, and that's the interesting question, right?
Yeah. Has anybody thought about replacing the auction with just a general swap meet?
That would be another option. I mean, if you look at the sellers, quite frankly, the advantage to the auction, the big advantage of having an auction from a member perspective, is that we can have, is that you can put in 1 or 2 items. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a table for 1 or 2 items. So,
yeah.
But what we may be able to do is say, let's have a swap meet. Maybe we should try a swap meet with some tables for folks who want to sell multiple items, and then have a couple of white elephant kind of bid tables like that, like they do at O Scale West. By the way, I'm open to guys, completely open to thought process about what the membership wants to do. Just because we've done it in the past doesn't mean we have to do it for it. You may want to say we're going to do 1 auction a year and maybe 1 swap meet a year or something like that.
I just want to point out that a lot of Midwest divisions do stage swap meets.
Cool.
Are you able to tell from the data that you did get as to whether items didn't sell because there were not enough people attending the meeting? I mean, I did not attend, not because of the venue, but because of the date. I had an obligation elsewhere. And so if I was there, I probably would have bought stuff. But if I'm not there, I'm not buying anything.
Yeah. So, so I need to get the data. I need to get with GR and pull the data out of the computers. When we looked at the data from the last auctions we had in 2019, the last auction we had in 2019 at the Elks, we had 37% of the items didn't sell. So, my assumption is this one was pretty similar. So I think the number of people probably doesn't have a big impact on whether the items sell or not. I think it's their attractiveness that has, and their interest level. And there's probably no way to correlate whether that was, but like I said, it would surprise me, just based on having sat there and watched the numbers as they go by. It would surprise me if we had 37% that didn't sell. I think we were less than that. And so that was when we had our last full auction before the pandemic.
So Phil, one of the things that I noticed there, it was that as I looked around the room, there were very few of what I would consider traditional buyers. There were a lot of traditional sellers. And somehow we need to attract buyers if we're going to have successful auctions.
Right. I agree with you 100%. You know, and that's one of the questions for the membership really is, you know, do you want to come to an auction? So, and again, I think we need to do one more and see, because we're still in the COVID time. I mean, I think there were still folks who didn't come because of COVID, that might come, you know, 6 months from now in December.
Bill, it's Frank. I know of at least 4 people that didn't come because of COVID.
Right.
By the way, I wasn't there because of a family event, and the whole family caught COVID almost. We had 5 of us. So I should have gone to the auction.
But you know, I think if you look at it and say, you know, normally we've had at the auction between 80 and 100 people, and we had about 60 here, which means we were 25 to 33% under what we normally have. If you kind of look at it that way and say 20, everything I'm seeing says 25 to 30% drop off in attendance for everything is happening because of COVID right now. So I mean, I think that's probably not an unreasonable expectation of what happened. I mean, the hope was we moved from March to May. Quite frankly, my hope was that by May, COVID would have been gone. It was the spring, et cetera, et cetera. Once again, it proved me wrong. You know, so we'll have to wait and see in December. But like I said, if you're interested in you know, participating and having a voice, when I send out the thing, send me an email. We'll have a committee and we'll go through it and make a decision as a group and get input and decide what's the right thing to do.
Well, I know the reason we do it on Sunday morning is for finances, but I'm not the only one that simply can't make it on a Sunday morning.
I agree. And actually the South Bay event is on Sunday because that's when they had available at the South Bay Historical Society.
Yeah.
What I would love to find is an alternative facility that we could use on a Saturday
Yeah.
for December. So, you know, and like I said, the problem is, guys, right now, it's me. I got to find that facility. I got to find the convention facility for 2024, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So if we want to make this stuff work, one of the things we need to do is have some local folks who can say, you know, I live in this town. I'll go investigate what we could use in this town. And I think that's the best way to try to find a facility and find that gem out there for us. So, you know, if you're willing to spend a few hours, you know, going through and looking at what the facility are, making a few calls, asking a few questions, getting a few pricing, that would be really good. Join the committee and do that, because what I'm trying to do is break the division up, you know, the main part here in the Bay Area, and try to get some local folks to take responsibility for finding venues locally. Because the challenge is, between us, I'm kind of overwhelmed trying to figure out what to do next. Because the problem is there's so many potential options. Like here in Pleasanton, we have a senior center. I need to go talk to the senior center and see what the senior center will do. You know, I know in Fremont, there's a big Alameda County library. I don't know what we could do there. So there's all these kind of local facilities. So I said, if you're willing to stay a couple hours and help investigate. By the way, on Alameda, we looked at the senior center in Alameda, and it looks pretty good too, as another potential location. So
yeah, the Fremont Library doesn't have the facilities that we need.
Okay. Yep.
And
And I'm not sure we can do I'm not sure we can do an auction there. I mean, this is kind of just generally, but yeah, no, and that's the whole thing is if we can get a little bit of focus and come up with 3 or 4 alternatives, then we can go negotiate and try to figure out which one's best. Okay, so like I said, participate in that when the time comes. So one other question on these Saturday events, I've kind of tried occasionally to have clinics and try to do something, and I'm just curious, from you guys' perspective, is having a clinic on these Saturday events important to you, or are you comfortable with it being just more social and updates? Because yeah, go ahead.
From my perspective, it's very important. It's really what draws me to these. I want to thank David for the excellent clinic he gave at the meet 2 weeks ago. He did an excellent job. And I think as we look at what potential clinics, clinics that are like David's, kind of hands-on and you got to see up close, work really good for in-person clinics. Clinics about the history of a railroad or a sense of operations, or some of those are more mental and would work well as PowerPoint presentations at one of these meets.
Yep. No, so that was why I just want to make sure. Go ahead, Jesse. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I think clinics at these things are, at these activities are good, you know, short ones, 20, 25 minute types of things, half hour at the most. You know, there's a couple of things that I would love to see again. I'd love to see Earl talk about lighting one more time, if you know what I mean. You know, just a very, how do you put a light inside a building or something like that? Things that have been done at some of the live things. They're not hands-on, but they're also not just talking about the history of something or something like that. It's a, you know, it's a model oriented activity.
Okay. Well, so just I mean, what I'm getting the first piece of feedback is, yes, we do want to try to have clinics there. So then the next perspective is, you know, anybody who's got anything, please jump forward. The problem is David and I are kind of in this interesting position that both of us can do clinics and we can propose doing stuff, but we don't want to propose ourselves all the time. I mean, Dave will reflect. I mean, I can do the clinics I did at the PCR and the national if we want to do those. I mean, one of the things I was going to do is go see if there were clinics from the PCR that convention that we would like to see.
I promise not to do a clinic.
Jesse, wait a minute, that's not fair. I would like to hear from all of you. What other, for these Zoom meetings we have, what clinics pop up in people's heads? And there's got to be, you know, we all have something we may not be excellent at, and we'd like to see the way that somebody else skins a cat.
I'd like to just answer Phil's question that for me, having clinics is what would draw me to these things. If they're just an update and a social call, not that interested in them.
That's good. That's good input, Earl.
And you know, my perspective is PCR, any railroad group, especially under NMRA, anything you do as a public activity, you're bound to get one or two new people in, and clinics are going to be the best thing for more introduction, a deeper introduction into the hobby. I think we could have a clinic at absolutely anything we do.
So here's one question. These were the clinics from, I don't know if you guys can see this. These were the clinics from the Return to the Redwoods. So, you know, one of the things is these are folks who already have clinics done, and we can contact them and ask them if they're willing to do a clinic virtually. Is there anything here that people really get excited about? And David's going to take a couple of notes, and then we'll contact some folks. So, you know, are there things here that are interesting topics?
Well, I'd always go for any of Tony Thompson's clinics.
So click that, hit up Tony on a clinic.
Yeah,
Tank
the
car
industries I
operation.
think are important for people to hear. So we
Yes,
have some
I
reason
attended
for a
Tony's
railroad.
clinic and it was excellent. I would highly recommend that if we can get him.
Okay.
I agree about the industries.
There were two on Tank Car Industries, and I
Yeah, Rich,
unfortunately couldn't go to the convention because I was very ill at that time.
I think the idea of that just the title "Backwoods Track," I wasn't able to go either, and it just was something that oh, you know, I have a real rural section that probably could be retracked. And I would wonder, just what's he talking about? Or
Okay. Well, so basically, that's one place to get some clinics. So we will contact a few of those folks and try to get them to come and replicate their clinics. I'm doing one for the Arizona guys I think later in June, early July. And I'll try to get them to do a quid pro quo and have someone do a clinic for us as well. So that's another thing is if you do a clinic for another division, if anybody asks you to do a clinic, make sure you ask them to do a clinic back for us and put them in contact with David or myself, and we'll ask them to do something. Cool. Well, that's it. And like I said, if there's something you'd like to do a clinic on, you got some slides on, done something on, send David an email and we'll get it set up.
Yeah, one thing I like to say is that, I'd like to attend a few more of these clinics, but they conflict with my club meeting on Saturday morning, the first Saturday. So we could maybe move it through the month, a different Saturday or something might help too.
Yeah, well, what we've done with this is we've just done every other Saturday. So it kind of bounces around in the months as it goes through them. And, the problem with this is, there just kind of conflicts with everything in life. So I agree. It's hard to get around that. So
I've
by the
seen
way,
I've seen a lot of videos done by John Abaticola about various people's layouts. I wondered if he would be willing to do a clinic for people who don't have a layout that's big enough or nice enough to warrant his doing one, but he'd give a clinic on how to do a video of your layout.
Noted.
So
Didn't
by
John do something like that as a part of his video series?
yeah, we can definitely ask John if he's willing to come in and do that.
Yeah, I mean videos things for a living, but he did several things on because he does a lot of layout tours.
Yep.
Yeah, basically, we're asking him to teach his potential competition.
Well, I think it's more just, what do you need to do to set up and do the right things? But I'll talk to him and see, it may be also just what do you need to do to get your layout ready to be videoed? What are
I think it's stuff like that.
Stuff you should do.
Getting the cat off the main line is a big one. I have two that I want to put up here, which is layout design overview and the SIG, and also operations overview and the SIG. Somebody that can talk about how the SIG supports the activity of layout operation, how and sort of a where we are today in layout operation and how the SIG works with that, and layout design and how that works today and how the SIG supports that. I think we might finger Seth for the operations, but for layout design, anybody's names come up?
Well, Byron Henderson, certainly.
Thank you. Yeah,
I'm always interested in layout design, but it's how do you miniaturize the prototype?
Mm-hmm. Selective compression, isn't that the phrase?
Well, not just selective compression, but how do you visualize a miniaturized version of an operating economic activity?
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to ask Byron to, as a thought process, to not do kind of the high level, because he does some high level, but maybe like take a scene that's on the prototype and how you translate that into a model scene with the right operational interest, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Well, I can talk to Byron. To some degree, I want to give people running room and not box them in too much. But suggest some of the ideas that are being thrown out here and see what they get inspired to yak about at us. So I've got Model Lighting Clinic on Industries, Mr. Thompson, Layout Design Overview / SIG, Operations Overview SIG, how to video your layout and getting it ready. Any others, gentlemen? And you model railroaders.
Hey, David, I really enjoyed your soldering clinic. It was very timely when I was doing some track feeders.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that version again or something
All right.
similar.
All right. Well, I think that's one of those perennial ones. Like you see a model railroader every year, they roll through certain topics time and time again with updates for new materials or tools, of course. But yeah,
I have
certainly.
a topic I'd really like to see somebody else address. Operations for one.
Oh,
How do you operate just your home layout
mm,
with nobody else involved?
So
there,
one thing that Ken we could do is do it. Maybe have a couple of people talk about that. Where there was a S scale kind of enhanced time saver at O scale West, and he actually used the operating scheme where you basically have a series of scenarios where scenario one moves some cars and scenario two starts with where the cars are. And I actually did that in a spreadsheet where you have all the spots and you move cars through, and he'd actually turn it into a book of instructions for the operators. And it was pretty interesting. So that kind of operations of one where you have, specific trains going out and things. So that could be an interesting option. I'll have to try to figure out, I'll go see if I can figure out who that was. And
operations for the lone model railroader.
Yeah.
I wanna definitely back that up for Ken. That's always an issue for people that have, less than basement sizes, or people who don't even have basement, you know.
Garage size in California.
Yeah. Yes, the California
I'll
basement.
tell you,
so
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that S-scale switching puzzles. I did it like 3 times, and a lot of pleasure out of it, and, working by yourself, and it gets as complex as you want. You just add each time you add a car to the plan, you double in complexity.
How many people were allowed to kibitz as you were doing the work, Fran?
I just tuned everything out. I did need a helper now and then.
Yeah.
so the other topic is, we are scheduled for September 25th, which is a Sunday, at the South Bay Rail Historical Society. So we need to put together 2 things for that. September's a ways off, but it is June already, so we got to think about this. The first is clinics. So if you're a South Bay person and you haven't done a clinic for a while, this is a great chance to do a clinic. We will have 3. I'm planning on having 3 clinic areas there. There'll be one in the big room. We'll probably have one in the boardroom, which will be good for smaller hands-on clinics. And then the thought process is to have an outdoor clinic and have some scenery work outdoors. I'm trying to get Wayne to do his rocks and Fran do what he did for us, but he's kind of fighting me, so I need some help on that one. But if somebody else has, a scenery clinic, that is something that is better done outdoors, we'll put a pop-up up and have a table under it and have an outdoor clinic where you can do rock painting or casting or whatever you want to do. So anything that's kind of messy and you could do outdoors, if somebody has a clinic on that, let David or I know, because we'll schedule those in for September. They're looking for a couple of outdoorish clinics.
Yeah, and Phil, you and I need to schedule a meeting in the coming week
Yep.
at your convenience.
And then the other thing is layout tours. So if you're a South Bay person with a layout, make sure you let me or Brian Booth know, and we'll put you on. We're building a database of layouts, so we want to get everybody who has a layout in is interested in potentially having their layout on tour at some point in the future into the database, because that way when we have a event in a location, we can contact everybody in a 5-10 mile radius about having their layout open for that day. So very much looking for South Bay layouts, and before I come hunting for you, come send an email to us, because we will come look for you.
Just one attribute to make sure you add to that is the number of people that can be accommodated simultaneously.
Yep. We're trying to get good data on each one, and we put them together. Exactly.
For instance, I can have one guest at a time. That's it.
If
And they're
if
gonna
they're
be
very
crowded.
if they're very friendly.
Yeah.
So if
Phil, another activity that's been popular in the past have been the John Allen switching contest. And it might be possible to get someone like Eric Moe, I think has it in his possession and operates it, to give a little clinic on the strategies and tactics and how the whole thing works for people who haven't ever jumped in and tried it.
What was that name, please?
Eric
again?
Moe, Eric Moe, I have Eric's. Yeah, he has the. We did not try to bring it to the auction just because I thought it was going to be too much for this auction and everybody had done it. So, but I think you're right, for the event in South Bay, that would be great, and that might be a great clinic to have of, how to beat the time saver.
Or survive it.
You might
Right.
talk to Bill Burkett too, because he's the one who used to win it all the time.
Right.
I attended the business meeting for the Silicon Valley Lines Club last night virtually, and mentioned to them the interest in a South Bay layout for September 25th. And the president of the club, James Brassel, agreed, and they're going to change their open houses to be one for the fall season. It'll be September 25th. Now, I'll be in Colorado on that date, but they may actually have some of their remote engineers operate some trains using their Raspberry Pi camera cards, etc., so that they would be able to demonstrate that for people in the layout. And it's a really big room, so it holds a lot of people. They're restricting access based on whatever the current infection rate counts are for the San Jose.
Yep.
So who knows what it'll be in September.
Well, that's good. That's a good one to add on. We will put that on the list. That was one of the layouts I was looking at from a club perspective. Absolutely.
Just remembered we have our big SP Historical Society meeting about that time in September in Modesto.
About airbrushing acrylics
Oh, a clinic on such, sir?
on using airbrush with acrylic.
Now,
Yeah.
is that for this venue, us in Zoom, or down in the South Bay? Which were you wondering about or wishing?
I don't care.
All right.
That's what I want to see it.
Fran, just tell him yes.
Yes, yes.
And Dave, I'm okay revisiting my lighting clinic, but not for a little while.
Okay, I'm sorry. Who was speaking there?
That's Earl.
Earl, okay. Okay.
We're just going to sign Earl up for at least one clinic in September. We'll let him choose what he wants to do.
No pressure, Earl.
No pressure.
Earl's a pro. He doesn't feel pressure from that kind of thing.
I have one thing I'm starting to work on again, and what I don't know is, would it really apply to the get-togethers? First of all, it's specific to 3D printing. It's specific to CAD, and it's specific kind of to. Well, it could be prototype, but you have to start with non-prototype. So what it is Tinkercad for 3D printing. The really basic start. There's so many people that are just not willing to put the time into Fusion 360 or a more powerful CAD program, and anyone can do Tinkercad. And so I don't know if that's too specific for the group. So you guys can judge on that.
Well, the thing is, there's going to be people that are doing it that can benefit from seeing how somebody else is approaching it. There are those people that are waiting to dip their toe in the water and might want to get a sense of how deep is the water, including financially, which is where I'm sort of spooked, is I don't want to blow a bunch of money on a new tool when I'm still not really using the ones I already have that much due to family and a bunch of other things.
So Fran, my suggestion would be pick something that people would want to model in 3D. You know, a switch stand, pick something, and then go through the process of how do you think about deconstructing that to do it in CAD, and then
Yeah.
how do you replicate it in CAD and get the ideas of your, you know, material removal, et cetera. I think that'd be a great clinic, and David will line you up to do it.
Okay, yeah, I was just concerned as to whether more than one person would walk into the room to see it.
There's a lot
You
of
know,
folks
Fran,
that
I think it's
go.
a great idea. You know, I did a clinic, you know, that intro to 3D printing, a little bit on Tinkercad and a little bit on 3D printing at the convention, and had a lot of good feedback. I'm kind of signed up to go up to Red and give a Tinkercad intro class sometime this summer.
Oh, cool. Maybe I'll go.
You're welcome to come on up. So we could do something like that. You know, I've thought about taking my 3D printer, you know, to one of these meets and having a live demo, but as Fran and Phil know, anything reasonable that you print takes an hour and some change. So it's not enough immediate, you know, gratification for people. And I'm kind of nervous about hauling the 3D printer around.
That's a tough one.
But I'd be okay doing a class on it. Maybe Fran and I can dream something up.
I've got something that I'd like to say. It's not really a clinic, but I'd like to see it somehow, and we could even do this by as part of our video meets, and that is what's new. There's all sorts of new products and new ideas going on in the model railroad world, and just sort of a sharing of some of the things that have come up. An example recently is on model railroad hobbyists. They've gotten this thing about if you want to flick your turnout switches, how to use the extra strength magnets that are now available to do the flicking, to hold the turnout in place.
Would this be, Ken, do you see this as a panel discussion perhaps?
I see it more of a panel, yeah.
Okay.
So I think it might be interesting to just have a time in these sessions where people can bring up what's cool. I mean, and so the point is just bring a link and you can put it in here in the link. So I'm actually going to, since this is I'll show you what's something cool. So if you're interested, this is, I'm going to share first. I don't
want to replicate my model railroad hobbyists, but I do use it for a lot.
But I'm not saying replicate what they do. I'm just saying, just put a link to that and say, hey, model railroad hobbyists had this really cool thing here. You should go look at it. And we'll just do it. Yeah. So it's not a place to talk about it, but just to let people know that I saw something cool. Okay. So this is on YouTube. I'll put the link in the chat. This is a video I just did, which we were at Hiller, and I actually ended up with a cab ride video of the 4 modules I built. And so I actually did the cab ride video. So this basically goes through and, you know, you kind of see all of the modules as a video. So it's pretty cool if you're interested in seeing kind of how the modules look together as a group. So that's something to see. I'll put that in the chat. So as you put stuff up, just tell everybody about it.
Yeah, just make a little special section of this of our Saturday morning chats to do the what's cool.
Yep.
It looks like you're a lot more scenic than you were in the past on those modules.
Yeah, well, those are the completed ones. Yeah, exactly. They're the kind of completed ones that are more or less completed. But the kind of the cab ride is a cool way of looking at it. And you'll kind of see as you go through it, it doesn't look too bad. So it's unfortunately for modelers, these little micro cameras you can put in your trains makes your modeling much more challenging because they get to see behind the scenes. You know, it's and actually it's interesting. Somebody told me last night, and I need to go find this, that someone had announced an engine with a built-in camera that's reversible to forward and back.
Hmm.
And I got to go find that because that, to me, that's the next big transformation in this hobby is going to be onboard video, because that'll really change lots of things about the hobby.
Doesn't that super layout in Hamburg, Germany have that installed on some of their equipment? I don't know if I haven't been there, but
You're talking about Miniature Wonderland?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've got everything there.
Yeah.
Well,
They're
yeah, I
insane.
think, people have done it kind of as a one-off and put video cameras and things, but the idea of being able to buy it commercially available where it's automatic and it works would be pretty cool.
This is in the sense of when operating an AA set of F units that you could, as you change direction, the camera and the other unit would, so you could see where you're going as you start doing like switching or stuff, that you
Right.
can
Right.
see all your moves.
It would be interesting to have the caboose view and the engine view.
Yeah, I'd call
Well,
it more of, rather than, just having camera and video on your layout, first person video, first person view, and that the person in control of the train is only looking at the screen.
right.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting from an operations perspective because now you move the engineers out of the layout room, and all you leave in the layout room is the brakeman / conductor, and he's now essentially telling the engineer to do a move. So it brings all sorts of interesting questions about how does the engineer remotely define distance? I mean, do there electronic tools to say, you can see how far the engine's moved, or do you put markers? Because, if I'm sitting there and I say, you need to back up 30 scale feet, and you're looking at a video screen in a remote room, how do you know when you've done 30 scale feet?
Well, the prototype goes 5 cars, 4 cars, 3
Exactly.
cars, half
Yep.
a
And that's
car.
exactly what I've done when I've operated remotely on the Silicon Valley lines. And I had to do some switching moves, and they had a brakeman on the site. And he told me, Hack, bring it back 5 cars, 3 cars, 2 cars, 1 car, half a car. That'll do. And I just trusted his audio that he
Yep.
was telling me the right thing to do, and I responded accordingly.
In a way, it's going back to a virtual version of the 1950s super club layout where you had the operators sitting up in a control room with looking out over the layout.
Walnut Creek.
You guys just described the Walnut Creek layout. Exactly. With the operating theater up above.
I have
I
a
think you'll
couple
get
of
used
items to share if we're into that phase, Phil.
Go for it.
Um, let's see here. You guys see the wrecked F40PH?
No.
Right down the embankment towards the river, damaging the engine that went, but Amtrak insists on getting it back to their shops without disassembling it or anything. So I had to figure out what to move it on, and I scrounged up a Athearn heavy-duty flat, which I understand from reading is a pretend car, but
Yes.
that's what's underneath one end. But the problem was the flat was too short to justify that and didn't have enough load capacity, or a regular flat car with just 4 axles on it couldn't carry the weight of a locomotive. So I got 2 of the cars and butchered them. And here you see the butchered car, which is waiting for me to figure out how to use my new airbrush to actually paint this extended car. You can see a brass spine that I put under here to reinforce the glue joints. But here's the question, gentlemen. The NMRA standards for weight are based on car length. If I weight this car to NMRA standards for the length of this car, I end up with a car that has half the axle loadings. That is, the weight on each axle will be half of what it would be if I weighted it. If I weight the standard, the loading is down, which seems to me with this sort of truck arrangement to be more likely to derail. And I'm wondering if I double the axles in this way, should I double the weight on the car over and above the NMRA standard? I'll take any comments or thoughts.
Why did they double the axles in the prototype?
Because they were trying to handle more weight and not break anything.
I think
But,
that's the answer.
well, the
You
thing
need
is
to
that
have
what,
more weight to just, I mean, and even at the micro physics level, I think you're absolutely right. You need more weight to justify the load on the axles to hold them in place.
yeah, well, you know, to prevent derailing. I
Yep.
read some comments about the car and they said they were really prone to derailing. And so, you know, I've got lots of pockets in here to slug lead shot or something into to weight it. That's not the issue, but it's just I was wondering if anybody had any experience with lots of axles and waiting for cars with more than the usual number of axles. Okay. That's,
Can
yes,
I
sir.
make up one point to you?
Yeah.
Because of clearance limitations on so much track, the prototype, they would have taken the trucks off the engine.
Yep.
And moved them separately on another car.
Yes. And I have seen prototypes
Yeah.
on virtual rail fan where the locomotives were not on the trucks. And I've seen examples on virtual rail fans where they were on the trucks. On the East Coast with the still today some low tunnels, certainly this car and locomotive would not be suitable. You know, it wouldn't work. But if it's in an area where tunnels have been modernized and set up for auto racks
Well,
and
it's
double
you know
stacks.
the railroads use the categories of the plate clearance
Yes.
plates.
Mm-hmm.
Plate C would be the modern. Actually, there's even I think a plate D or something that's for even slightly larger.
Yeah.
But the pre-plate C lines in the Northeast particularly are a problem.
Yeah. I'm going to close my eyes to that subject and assume the locomotives kept in territory where such a tall load would be acceptable.
Well, you
But
know me, I'm sort of a prototype nudge.
yep. Well, I am proto freelancing and faking it when it serves my purposes. In this case, I want to have the whole locomotive up on this messed around car.
Yeah.
Uh, but thank you very much, Ken. Still looking forward to hearing when you get those ladders, because I
Yeah.
sure want to see what we can do.
By the way, I do have one thing that I was going to bring up just as a reminder to everybody, or you may or may not be interested. Um, but June 19th, which is a Sunday or Saturday, the Saturday before Father's Day, um, the Bay Area Railroad prototype modelers are going to have their meeting up at in Richmond at St. Stephen's Church. And if you just go and do a search on BAPM, you'll find it. Um, anyway, that's people like me who not only count the rivets but measure how big they are.
Okay, I have another item if I may, Phil.
Sure.
Has anybody had experience with this piece of hardware? I've purchased one and am curious if anybody has been actually using these. I'm going to try it just as another taste into what modern technology offers to us, with the idea here, I gather, is you load up an app onto your smartphone and then it talks via Wi-Fi to this guy and then goes into the NCE system so you can have it as a cab. I was wondering if anybody else has tried them prior.
So this is an alternative to using the serial to USB bus, USB interface cable, and then running GMRI and Wi-Fi with GMRI. This is a separate just Wi-Fi interface you can use engine driver with directly off your phone. So this is basically like the MRC module they sell, which you just plug in and it works.
Right. Well, maybe I'm going to be the guinea pig for this for the group.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I use Loco 5, which is a totally different concept.
Right.
Um, but this essentially will replace the radio throttles in the NCA equipment.
Yep.
Which was always a weak spot and a problem was they had the radio throttles, and this gets rid of them entirely.
But one wonders with technology, there's never a free lunch. So I'm wondering, I'll be finding out, if you will, because I have radio throttles for NCE. I'll be finding out what are the advantages and drawbacks of each approach, and I'll let you guys know as I implement it, get it running, and we'll see what I discover.
Yeah, the only drawback we found, now this was with MRC, not with NCE when we ran it, was the latency can get pretty high. You know, from your phone to the app to JRMRI to the serial interface to NCE, sent over DCC to your locomotive. So when you hit the button to blow the whistle on your phone, with that system, it takes a lot longer. With these kind of dedicated, like MRC has a dedicated Wi-Fi box you can buy. With that, the latency was a lot less. So this should have that same lower latency, I would think.
It sounds like I'm going to be finding out for you guys.
How much are they charging for it? Just out of curiosity, do you know?
I think I dropped $119 into it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Iron Horse Hobbies was the vendor that I used.
Cool.
They were out of stock for quite a while, and then they showed up, and so I ordered one. And it's just to see how it works compared to the radio throttles. Ken, you make me fearful. I have invested in a lot of radio throttles and CE, so we'll find out how that works. So
I may have some surplus NCE stuff soon.
Okay. Okay.
So before I run, I'm going to share something real quick. This is kind of a bit of a, it's a bit of a teaser. So this is a building that actually is the Standard Oil shed that was on the wharf in Monterey. This is an O scale. You can kind of tell the size of it with the windows. It's by about 3 inches by 2 inches. The frame is all 3D printed. And it's actually printed so there's 3 layers of wood here. There's the framing layer, there's the bracing layer, and then on the outside there's a furring layer because the outside's going to be an aluminum siding. So I kind of got a couple of pictures here. If you look at it, you can see here, this layer is the furring strips which are glued on to this layer. And then you can see these cross pieces are printed on the surface of the framing. So when you look at the inside, you'll actually see the back side of the metal siding on the wall, and you'll see 3 layers of framing between you and the siding. This is actually a carrier for the lighting. So this is actually designed to fit right across the roof. These bars are to carry the power on either side. You have to excuse these slides. These are the carrier. This is actually the roof, and it'll fit over the lighting. So the lighting will sit. This is an assembly jig I put together real quick. Took about 30 minutes to print, and it's designed to carry it. So this sign is basically 2 pieces printed and glued together, so I can have equal rising on both sides. Little blocks here to carry these trusses. They'll glue in there, and then there's actually ceiling pieces or roofing pieces that are cut to fit on those. This is just a picture. This is soldering the lighting on these. These are actually 3D printed light fixtures with 6030 LEDs inside of them. And now they're being soldered on here on the sides. And notice what I'm doing is I'm using heat sinks right here because I'm soldering right here. And this is PLA right here, and it'll melt really quickly. So anyway, just some little bit of work on a current project. I'll turn it into something more detailed at some point in the future, but it's turning into a pretty cool little building.
Hey, Phil, are you using gray PLA and then painting it?
Yeah, using gray PLA, and then I'm doing the same painting I did it covered in the clinic that I did up in PCR. You paint it, spray paint it with rattle cans, and I use a color called caramel. It's a little bit. It's not kind of that lighter tone. It's kind of more of a reddish light color, and then dry brushing it with different kinds of acrylics on top of that to create the.
Yeah, the color looks really good. I've been using camouflage, but I'll try caramel.
Yeah,
Is that a
yeah,
Rust-Oleum?
it's a It's just another one of the Rust-Oleums. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, you can kind of see it in some of these. I need to go do a little bit more touch up. Now this is the side that's out, so. But yeah, it's a pretty cool technique.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot with making fixtures and jigs with a 3D printer also. I think that's one of the benefits people don't realize with it.
Yep. And by the way,
Oh,
these are all the interior pieces. This is a cabinet to go at the end, and you really can't see. It's actually got holes drilled through it right in the back corner, and that's where the wires will run up to go to the power rods. And then this is just another cabinet, and this is a desk and a table and a couple of chairs. That's kind of all the interior furniture.
Phil,
Yes,
you
sir.
need a you need a miniature electrical inspector to make sure it's up to code.
Yep. But yeah, so all of these were painted, separately and then glued together. So it's, but anyway,
Do you ever go look at the Sierra West website?
I have, yes.
Yeah, he's got an O-scale shed coming up, and he had a blurb just recently about all the details inside, with the pillar-mounted drill press and some other things that would look good in your shed, but I don't think those are available separately.
Phil, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you were to use conventional building methods, you get your scale lumber
Yep.
and you cut your chopper and blah, blah, all that sort of stuff. To achieve what you've done with this, considering the time it takes to program and fool around with the printer and different runs and stuff, is it that you get it done quicker or better? What is the balance between those things?
I think time wise, so here's the thing is for the first one you do, it's going to take more time.
Mm-hmm.
At some point it will take less time once you kind of get the concepts down, especially, this is the second building I've done this way. I have a third one I'm starting. That one's probably going to take less time because you kind of get the learnings of what it takes to get stuff done in a certain way. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's probably more accurate, but you could be just as accurate if you're cutting strip wood, if you were willing to take the time. I've got the Unimation sander, and you could use that, and I'm sure you get really close. The biggest reason for me is actually really, really simple. I can pick this thing up and throw it to you 20 feet away, and you can catch it, and it won't do any damage. I can literally you can literally pick this thing up just like it is on the workbench, just like it's sitting there, pick it up, knock it off the workbench onto the floor, and 90% probability it's not going to be damaged. You do that with a stick frame building that's glued together, it's going to shatter. And that's the real problem I have with stick framing is there's no strength in it at all. I mean, if you hit it at all, it's going to, and this, you get a lot of strength in it. It's actually pretty strong for a small building. Now you go down to HO, think about a stick frame building in HO, how fragile it is. So that's probably the biggest advantage.
Got it. Sounds like particularly for like modular people that are moving their buildings around a lot, that could be a nice advantage. Of course, there's always Plasticville. Remember Plasticville, gentlemen?
Yep. Well,
A lot of plastic fill.
and actually, the building that I was going to build here, originally, I was going to build it in styrene. I actually bought all the styrene to just build it in styrene. And I was going to build it in styrene, and then I looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and I decided, if you think about, I mean, if you take a second and look at the building and you think about for a second how this will look, and imagine if you built the same building in styrene, how it would look. And, when you look on the inside and you see those layers, you're not going to get that in styrene unless you go in and add all that in styrene on the inside. So, it's kind of interesting. I think you can get something that has a much more realistic appearance than you can with kind of the sheet work. Of course, strip wood, you can still do the same thing.
Well,
anyway,
when you say stick built, by the way, I think contest. when I think about survivability, kids, travel, stuff like that, either sheet built or going to 3D printing certainly can give you a lot more strength, although it's still not as good as plastic film.
And that's the question that's going to be an interesting question is when you start putting models like this in to a contest, how do they get evaluated?
Ooh.
I mean,
Well,
it's a really interesting question. And I don't know. I have no idea. But, you know, when you look at them, you take a picture of them, they're going to look very realistic. You know, it's
well, I just hope people judging don't downrank somebody. It's simply another modeling technique. Although I'd love
Yeah.
to hear other people's thoughts on that. Is it cheating or is it just another modeling technique to master?
Or does it require its own special category for judging?
Mm,
You know, there's been a lot of talk about these CAD type things, and for the most part, the feeling has been that if you design the part and you print it yourself, then it would count as a scratch build part, as opposed to designing a part, sending it to Shapeways and having Shapeways print it, because then you didn't make the part yourself. There's still, even at the national level, discussion about, you know, 3D print and the contest and how it's rated.
Well, it still seems like there's a lot of cussing and fussing that has to go on to achieve the sort of result that we see here. So I think I would honor somebody's efforts, unless, you know, but even if you have Shapeways make some of these components, you still got to paint it, you've got to assemble it clean, you've got to detail.
Yeah, but they're just saying that doesn't count as a scratch build part. Because it's like if you needed a steam dome for a locomotive, you drew it up and then give it to Ken to machine for you. You didn't scratch build that part. You just did a drawing. So if you load it on your laser cutter or you do the 3D printing yourself, because, you know, as Fran or Phil can attest to, just because you put it on the 3D printer doesn't mean you get a good part. So you have to make it all yourself. But, you know, 3D printed and laser cut parts are welcome in the contest models.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think when you look at the model that Earl built, and that I know Fran helped a lot with the printing of, I mean, that's going to get evaluated, I think, as purely a scratch built project. I can't imagine anybody evaluating it any other way. And you're absolutely right. It's you know, the concept of 3D printing didn't exist in 1960 when a big part of being an MMR was, or 1970 when it was, big part of being an MMR was doing brass construction. You know, it's a whole different thing today. So.
Yeah, and the other side, the flip side of this discussion, there's a lot of people, including myself, that will get much more relaxation and satisfaction out of sitting down with sticks and glue and doing it in a, you know, meditative kind of way, the traditional way. And I wouldn't want to, you know, pull people away from that. People who enjoy that should keep doing it, and I enjoy it. I just get in a rush, and when I really want to enjoy the hobby, that's what I'll be doing.
Well, my doctor just insists I can only use popsicle sticks and Elmer's glue, so that sort of restricts me in my modeling.
Well, I have to say, I'm going to jump here and I'm going to leave David in charge. And like I said, I have to run down to the fairgrounds because we're open for the good guys. If anybody's interested in seeing cars and railroads, come to the Pleasanton Fairgrounds this weekend. And I look forward to seeing you there. If not, we'll see everyone in a couple of weeks.
So, thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everyone. And like I said, David will be in charge. And I think the recording will end now with me leaving. So we'll all say goodbye on the recording. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Goodbye, all.
Show.
Goodbye, all.
Okay. Take care.